Hello and welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise. Today we're joined by Sally Doherty, who's an English children's author who lives with ME. It's brilliant to have you on, Sally, and thank you for wearing your hat. We're actually talking on Halloween, so it's kind of really appropriate, isn't it? So it's
Yeah,
it's good.
I'm glad
Um,
you mentioned that. There is a reason for me
yeah, yeah.
when we're recording it.
Yeah, no, it's just it just happened that when we were planning it, it just sort of like, oh, well, what about this day? And then I realized it's Halloween, so it fits in with the book. So we're going to talk a bit about Sally's writing today and her illness journey. So do you want to tell us about your ME journey and what life looked like kind of for you before ME and what it looks like now?
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me today. And I know you've been doing a lot of them, so I appreciate your time and energy. So I have had severe ME for just over 18 years. It was at the start of an October when I fell ill. So I was in my early 20s. And until then, I had a really healthy life, full of exercise. I'd get really stressed if I couldn't do dancing or swimming most days. And I had graduated from university and I'd been working in London for about a year. And then it was a Thursday afternoon, kind of strange that we often can remember the exact
Mm,
day and time. So it was a Thursday afternoon, and I had some really strange symptoms. So I had this headache, it's really searing headache, in like above my eyes where I'd never had one
mm,
before, and with painkillers it just wouldn't go away. I felt nauseous, and I had this strange lethargy. And I tried to go to my dance class, and had to leave halfway through, which never ever happened. And then over the course of the next week, I gradually ground to a halt, managed to get to work 2 of the days. And then that was that really. My sister had already had ME for 2 years.
oh wow.
So, and ironically or interestingly, she had the exact same symptoms as me when on the day she fell ill. And it really felt like a switch had flicked in my brain and body, and that just everything felt different. And yeah, so we already knew as a family about
Mm,
ME, and so we knew from the start with me that it was at least some sort of post-viral thing. Um, so it's always been severe ME right from the start. After about a year of having it, I saw a ME clinic. Obviously they can't offer very much, but I learned how to pace
mm,
basically. And since then, I've always paced to manage down the worst of the symptoms.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, so you sort of went from like a really busy kind of life before, and then after Emmy, was that kind of really difficult? Was that a difficult process to adjust?
You're wearing that. Well, yeah. So I remember saying to my boss, after I'd been off work for a week, how inhuman and isolated it felt,
Mm,
having no idea what was in store. And I loved work, and I loved. We had a really good. I had a really good colleagues and really kind of social network there. So I just really, really missed everything.
mm,
Definitely went through a lot of grief in that first year. It felt like I had been dealt a life sentence. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard process, isn't it? That I remember for me for that first 6 months becoming ill, it was scary because I knew what it potentially meant, and you're just always waiting then to sort of think, are things going to improve? And it's like yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a sort of an endless thing, isn't it? Because you're thinking, are things going to pick up, or is this it for me now? But
So sweet.
um, so what led to you to set about writing, and what led you into sort of writing children's books?
I'm just gonna. My eyes are getting sore. Just gonna put my glasses on. So I didn't intend to write. When I was a kid, I loved writing, wrote stories, but then, life's busy, working or exams or studying,
Mm,
whatever. Yeah. So the first couple of years of the illness, it was very much all-consuming. And when I was lying in bed resting, literally couldn't see beyond the absolute trauma in my own body. But after a couple of years, once the pacing had helped manage down the worst of the symptoms, and by resting in bed so much, this kind of small space opened up in my brain where I was kind of be a bit more aware of the world. And the story just flew into my head and demanded to be written. It wasn't anything like I'd ever experienced before. It was a real, you have to do this. But I wasn't well enough. So for several years, I took notes, 5 minutes a day when I could, took notes. And my husband, who was then my boyfriend, bought me a dictaphone. So then I would put notes on that and he would type them up. And it was about 8 years of just having to sit on the story until I gradually felt able to write a little bit, which was 5 minutes a day at the start. And then now I can do about 30 minutes a day, 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow. Yeah. So the ideas came quite a long time before you were able to like really make it sort of turn into something in a sense. So yeah, that's amazing. And
yeah, I think it was about 15 years. On the
wow.
side, it's kind of been my life goal, and it's been something that has kept me going, knowing that I somehow needed to get this story out of me.
Yeah. So it must have felt like a real achievement when you actually like finally held the book in your hands after so long. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, do you want so where did the story inspiration come from? Was it from like you reading different things? Is it a bit of like Harry Potter sort of thing, or was it's very different from anything like Harry Potter, isn't it? It's quite a unique story. I haven't read the second one, but I've read the first one. So
I mean, subconsciously, maybe there was a bit of Harry Potter in there, but I purposely tried to not make it the chosen one in a boarding school, anything like that. So I purposely tried to make it different. The actual story idea came from a scene that I was going through. So I was, it was a hot summer's day. It started to rain. I was resting in bed, and I said to my boyfriend, "Oh, I think the attic windows are open. Maybe you should go and close them." And that is the kind of scene in my book where the Toby's life twists into the adventure. Excuse me. So his mum has ME and is resting in bed, and it's a hot summer's day, and she says to Toby, "Go up to the attic to close the windows." And I thought to myself, what would happen when my boyfriend went up to the attic if he found something up there? Because we often heard, creaks and the floorboards creaking. So I thought, what would happen if there was something strange up there, and how would that thing or person have got up there without us noticing? So that's how the story and it was pretty much fully formed that day, the whole thing, when it just flew into my head.
So obviously it's it'd be good to talk about the book without kind of like giving away spoilers, because I know that people might want to read it, and particularly because of the ME content in it. But so do you want to tell us a little bit about? So obviously something lands in the attic. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the story?
Yeah. Hopefully without spoilers. So Toby is a 12-year-old boy who is a young carer for his mum who has severe ME. And he loves playing football, loves hanging out with his friends, but since his mum fell ill 2 years ago, he just wants to stay at home and keep an eye on her, and he kind of is withdrawn from life. And I think I shared a map with you, so maybe we could share the map. So on the map, we can see that at the back of Toby's house and at the back of his garden, there's this strange building, which is a strange organisation, and it's surrounded by high barbed wire fence and a high hedge, and it's got this strange kind of satellite dish with telescope rotating the sky, and no one knows what goes on there. And one evening, Toby sees a strange, or sees a girl at one of the windows, seems to be screaming for help. And then the same night, someone crash lands in his attic. And it turns out there is a secret city of witches in the sky. And Toby has to help these witches. And by doing so, he finds out what's really going on in the mysterious organization. And he also comes to terms with his mum's illness and their situation.
There's some. I haven't read the first book. There's some really like heavy themes in there as well. How did you find writing it in terms of like aiming it at a particular like demographic of children? What did you have in your mind when you were writing it? Because it's got to be like easily read by kids, but it's also you're also raising some kind of really sort of like quite scary at times themes, aren't you? So like how did you sort of find that balance in terms of like meeting a child's reading needs amongst all that as well?
So it's no surprise that obviously the ME theme was in there, because when you have severe ME and moderate ME, it really controls every aspect of your life. You can't get away from it. So there's no surprise that that was in there, and it's quite cathartic for me having that in there. But equally, it's an underlying theme, and I definitely had to balance it with the adventure and the excitement and the main plot, and also humor. And I try and make them, I think there's more humor in the second one as well, from like the strange woman in his attic is quite clumsy and she's kind of the humorous element. So I definitely had to balance it. My editors also toned down the ME part.
Okay.
So yeah, I think just because I was so desperate to show how dire the situation is, but you can't really for that age group. So it was definitely toned down.
But I think it felt like you got it just right, because a lot of the book is kind of like from Toby's perspective, so it's like Toby's thoughts as well, and like from a 12-year-old boy's perspective, it's really interesting because that's like a really interesting. My son's 12, so I when I was reading the book, I was kind of like reading it, kind of thinking about how he would respond in those situations as well, and it's interesting because you've got kind of like a child that's like on the cusp of kind of like developing into being an older young person and finding their own way in the world and thinking about who they are and their own identity and things like that. But at the same time, he's also kind of having to carry this heavy burden of his mum's illness and how she's coping with it. So it's almost like a lot of the time, mum is like seen through his eyes, and how his mum perceives the illness rather than it kind of like her own perspective. And I thought that was really cleverly done, because he's having to sort of like deal with that. Was that something you were like thinking about, particularly in terms of like how you managed addressing, because you don't even kind of like say it's Emmy until kind of like further into the book, do you? It's almost like something's wrong with mum, but you don't quite know. Was that quite a difficult challenge?
So yes, it was a definite. I definitely purposely decided not to mention the fact that it was Emmy till about 2/3 of the way through, because people can often come to something with their own preconception of the illness, which certainly with Emmy and all the stigma around it is not that good. So I wanted people to see it for the real biological illness that it is, and for the real experiences that Toby and his mum are going through, before I mentioned that it was Emmy. Yeah.
So the one of the things that was really interesting to me was the witches and how you address them within the book. And there's like a whole community, and there's a whole sort of like you say, city, and there's a whole dynamic going on there as well, with like challenges to leadership and things like that. And it feels like there was a real sort of like in-group out-group dynamic that they were like stigmatized. And there was a real scene that kind of was quite really heavy around kind of going back in time, where Toby sort of like stepped into a memory almost of what happened to witches or people that were perceived to be witches sort of in the past. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and what your thinking around that was? Because it was quite obvious that there was something going on there in terms of like challenging perceptions of certain groups. Was that in your thinking?
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely kind of this theme of witches having been persecuted. And I think I'm not sure that everyone spotted how there was the kind of minority representation going on there. So I think that's great that you spotted it. So yeah, the witches have lived in this secret city in the sky for over 200 years. And few Irvins, or humans as witches call them, few Irvins know about them, but the ones that do fear them without knowing anything. And I pulled a quote actually that the head witch says on this theme. This is when she's explaining to Toby. People are often scared of outsiders, of those who are different. They react without trying to understand more. We intend no harm. We do not believe in violence. We wish only to be able to live freely. So I definitely wanted to represent how you know we often treat humans often treat people who are different badly without understanding them, and I think it's certainly something that's poignant at the moment with everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah, and I think for kids particularly, that kind of gaining an insight into those challenges that we see in society, it's almost like using the book as a bit of a vehicle for helping them to see difference, and that actually there's an important element of needing to accept and things like that, and also I suppose it almost felt like a reflection of the ME community in a way for me, like thinking about we almost like live in clouds in the sky to other people because we're there, but we're not seen as, in a sense. We're kind of like we're abstract in a way because we're kind of like not in society, but we're still here. Yeah, it was
Yeah, that's really true. And like you said, if children can gain some awareness from the book about people with ME, about young carers, about minorities, then that's brilliant. As well as having an exciting, enjoyable read, kind of have to get the balance. But every time that I know a teacher's bought the book, or they're even better when they say they're reading it as a class, then I think that's 30 more kids that are being introduced to ME and hopefully gaining some empathy, which we need.
Definitely, yeah. So I love the way that it's a really exciting book, and like it was really well written, and I've said on the podcast before that I don't read a lot now, and now I tend to sort of stick to audiobooks, and it tends to be like non-fiction that I read or that I listen to, because with I'll maybe try and start a novel or something like that, something I want to read, but then I just get bogged down in all the different characters and all the different plot lines, and you've got like 100 different things going on. So like, I would say to any adults that kind of want to get back into reading, like this is a perfect kind of opportunity, because it felt easy to read, but also I got really swept away in it, and I really enjoyed it. So it was good, and particularly it's a good book when you're getting about 3/4 of the way through, and it hypes up, and you just want to keep reading it to find out how it ends. So yeah, it was good. Was it a difficult process writing it for you in terms of managing your ME? And I know you said earlier, like you sort of balancing how much writing you do every day. Is that a real challenge in terms of like managing your symptoms and things?
Yeah, so it's basically my biggest task of the day. And I did want to make apparent that how I seem now is not how I am most of the time, because it can, I don't want to give false appearances. I do something like this maybe 3 times a month, whether that's having a visitor or doing a virtual school visit. And the rest of the time, the reason I can do this is because I'm resting and managing symptoms the rest of the time. But in terms of the writing, so it's my biggest task of the day, apart from the basic necessities. And it is frustrating in terms of the fact that, well, like the story was in my head for 15 years until it was finished, until it was out there. So it's frustrating that I can't go faster. But equally, on the other hand, if I hadn't have fallen ill, I'm not sure I ever, well, I certainly wouldn't have had this story to write. So that's definitely a silver lining. And a benefit of only being able to write a little bit is that I have so much time to work through the plots, make sure everything, there's continuity, build up the world. So I think it's better for how much time I have to think about it. So
yeah, and I think I've spoken to other people as well about how when we are like crashy or when we're feeling really rough, and the same for me. Like you said, I've done a few of these interviews now, but it's one of the few things that I do generally. So it's like a lot of my time spent like resting during the day or whatever, and then I'll maybe do this for like half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever, and then I'll go and rest again, and I'll do a bit more editing and things. But yeah, it's about managing your time. But I think for a lot of people that are really creative living with ME, it's a balance in terms of like even like the rest time when you've got like ideas buzzing around your head, isn't it? And you sort of like you maybe like write something down, or you sort of like you sometimes it's hard to switch off, and it's that balance, isn't it, between sort of wanting to be creative and having to switch off at the same time. So yeah.
I'm just gonna move to my sofa so I wanted to do the whole promotion.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I just need to have something to lean my head against.
Yeah, we're nearly done, I think, aren't we? So
yes. Okay.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask about, obviously, like Toby's going to be a trilogy, and so you've got the first book, and then the second book came. When did the second book came out recently? Was it, or was it?
Yeah, it was right at the end of March this year.
So are you still writing a third one, or is that sort of like you finished it?
Just finished the third draft. Just finished the first draft of the third one. So I'm at that point where I'm so happy to finish the first draft and completely in denial about all the edits that it needs. But it also feels quite momentous because this, like I say, it's been my purpose to get this trilogy that was in my head down, and now it's down on my laptop. It's in there. So yeah, so I got all the edits to do. So the third one's hopefully out in 2025. So
Yeah. So how's it going to feel once you've finished it and it's out there? Have you got like other plans for writing, or have you got lots of other ideas? Yeah. And are those is that children's writing still, or do you think you'll change your sort of like approach? Or
so fortunately, I do have lots of other ideas, which I think is a good thing. Otherwise, it would be a bit of a
you'd feel really,
what do I do now? So I've got a 5,000 word book coming out with HarperCollins next September, which is also for the same age group. And I'm not supposed to talk about anything that it's about, but there is a theme that people watching this will probably like. So I'm very excited to have that theme in another book. And then I've got several other kids fiction books that I'm in the middle of or that are in my head. So it definitely, yeah, again, I never choose to just the ideas come. So definitely want to stick with children's books.
Yeah. Well, it's been really good to chat and to learn a bit more about your thinking and your process, and I guess I want to say thank you for putting Emmy out there into, because I think it must be quite a unique thing to have a children's book that's got an Emmy content in it. So I think that's really appreciated, and I've tried to get my son to read it, but he's just not a reader, and it's just but I think if he tried, he'd probably get swept away with it. But he's not a reader. So but yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for your writing, and we'll look forward to hearing what's next as well for you. So
thank you so much for your time and for having me as well, and to everyone, if anyone listens, thank you too.
yeah, brilliant. Thanks a lot.